So just to start everything out, I'm going to jump directly in. I'm not going to share too many slides. I know that some people like to share slides. I'm more of a demo guy. I like to show, jump in and really kind of show products and what we can do with them. So I'm jumping in here. I'm just at my home screen, and on the left we can see our home. We can see everything that is on our navigation. Again, we're not really going through that today, but for the home page we have two options. We're going to cover both of those today, both the Launchpad, which is you can see it's a new feature, and the Multicloud overview, which is also a newer feature. So the Multicloud overview first, and this only requires us to connect a cloud account. Right now I'm set for all of our clouds, so everything we have from vCenter, our public clouds, AWS, Azure, GCP, to our VMware clouds, be that VMware Cloud on AWS or AVS, OCVS from Azure, Oracle, or GCVE from Google. So we can see all of these are kind of displayed across the top of the screen here, and I can move back and forth between them. But all I've done is once you've connected any sort of cloud account, you'll get the options here. If you don't have, for example, a VMware Cloud Foundation, then this tab just wouldn't appear at the top. What this is going to do is kind of give us an overall inventory as far as what sort of accounts we have. It's going to show us all of the locations of all our accounts. These numbers are actually around these purple circles are kind of giving us the number of accounts we have in that region. So if I click on anything there, we can see it'll zoom in for us and say, okay, we have an AWS in Mumbai and also a Google account there. It'll give us the breakdown of where everything is located. So we can see all of our accounts that we have over here, our inventory, as well as our compute storage, our applications, any sort of containers we have running as well. Now, we're on all clouds, so we're getting at everything that we have over here on the right is going to be for everything. If I keep scrolling down, we see we have our VMware Cloud, and this is going to give us our capacity. So we have, out of all of our clusters, we have 44 clusters, 9 of which apparently are running out of capacity at the moment. But we can see from below, we're only really using 14% CPU, 12% memory. So we probably have some clusters there that are maybe not using their resources efficiently. We have plenty of capacity left, but in this case, a couple of them, 9 of our clusters are actually still running out of capacity. So maybe it's something we'd want to check into. Further over, we have our time remaining, so it's going to let us know not just as far as the number of gigahertz or terabytes or whatever we're looking at, but in days, how long do we have? We have our costing, our total cost of ownership, any potential savings that we could potentially save monthly, as well as any realized savings we have. So anything we've already taken advantage of from our potential savings. And each of these we'll dive into further as we move along when we jump into the Launchpad section. So we'll get a little more of a breakdown. This is really just showing us from the high level, as far as all of our clouds, where do we have any sort of savings opportunities. We have our public cloud services. So we can see that we are using, or for the most part, we have Elastic Network Interfaces on AWS is what we have the most accounts for, all the way down to EC2 instances, Kubernetes containers, our pods, S3 buckets, so on and so forth. And will also give us our total alert volume. And at the very bottom, our sustainability. What is our green score? And we'll talk about green score and power consumption, our impact on the environment here as we also move through. This is more of just a high level. Where are our accounts? What are our accounts? What sort of capacity are we looking at? And so on. If we wanted to break that down further, we can use click on any of the tabs above. So if I click on vCenter, we're going to get all of our vCenter accounts. Looks like we actually haven't configured any of our physical data centers. So we don't necessarily have that set up at the moment. That's something we can certainly do. I know a lot of ours are out in Washington and a couple in New York, but it's give us the link then to go and configure our actual physical data centers. But it will give us our top objects. So now we have added in our virtual machines, because now we're talking about just our vCenter accounts. So we have those virtual machines we can add in there, our host system, data stores, vSAN, all that stuff. If we scroll further down, we're going to get the same information, just capacity on only our vCenter accounts. So we can see our clusters went down from 44 when we were looking at all accounts, and now we're down to 39. So we have 39 vCenter clusters. And the only thing different, scrolling down here, is going to be our growth trend. So it's going to let us know if we've grown any. Looks like we haven't really grown anything recently in the last month or so. Not much has grown there, but will give us if we have either grown or maybe we've deleted some VMs or deleted some things, some orphan disks maybe, and that would go down if we saw that as well. And same thing if we were to click over to VMware Cloud on AWS, we're going to see the same information. Nothing is going to change there. Everything will kind of be the same as we've already seen. Just of course the map will change because we have different locations, but everything else will be exactly what we've already looked at. And that's the multi-cloud overview. Again, just giving you that high level kind of inventory, what you have running, so you can kind of keep track of that, keep track of your total cost of ownership, your potential savings and realized savings. And there's other places, of course, you could dive into to look at that as well. So moving over to the Launchpad, and this is the second portion, and we can see there's a lot more options here to go through. So this is where we'll spend the rest of today, the rest of the time looking at this Launchpad. Now we can see observability, capacity, cost, all of our potential options we can go to here in the Launchpad, just like there is on the left navigation side. If we looked at troubleshooting or optimizing, we have capacity, reclamation, workload placement, which we'll get into in this capacity tab. So this isn't the only way we can get to those topics. It's just one way we can get to them is using this Launchpad. And this is sort of built as a little bit of a journey that you can take. If you're unfamiliar with RA operations, you can use this Launchpad to familiarize yourself a little bit with some of the screens, some of the dashboards, some of the things we can look at, some of the topics we can visit if we want to learn more about our environment. So let's just jump in. We'll start just go down, not necessarily in any sort of order as far as importance or anything like that. We'll just start clicking on the pieces as we go along. The first one happens to be observability. And so we see, this is all about kind of checking into. We're not necessarily configuring anything. We're looking at, again, high level on what is happening within the environment. Of course, we could dive deeper, but in this case, we're just looking high level. So first of all, we're looking at alerts. So let's go ahead and jump into alerts, and these are pretty straightforward. But we can look at all of our alerts that are currently here. We can group them by criticality. We can group them by time, definition, our scope. We can group these as much as we want. And if we go to any of these random, well, not random, but if we go to any of these alerts, I'm choosing randomly. If we click on one, we can then look at the details around this specific alert. So in this case, we're looking at a system board sensors are reporting problems. So we get some recommendations. We might need to change or replace the hardware. We're going to get what this alert is based on. We can see the full alert here that's coming through. We've got a hardware sensor state or health state. It's from Dell. Okay, we can see a little bit. It looks like it's PowerEdge. So we can see a little bit of information around it. We could also then look at if there's any related alerts, maybe that might be related to this specific problem. We can look at potential evidence. In this case, since we're just talking about potentially a hardware issue, it probably is not a whole lot on potential evidence. We probably won't look at that. Won't be a whole lot here on that particular one. But alerts pretty straightforward. We can jump to these specific object if we wanted to. It looks like that's on a VMware host, so we could go in and jump to that host if we wanted. We can see that we have a connection with ServiceNow set up. So that is being set as new in ServiceNow. It's not being assigned to anyone at the moment. Obviously, our priority and our urgency, so that's being set. We could leave a note here as well if we wanted to leave any sort of notes, and that will also then get sent to ServiceNow. So we can, if there's any sort of tickets that have been open, we'll get those notes on those tickets as long as we have that ServiceNow connector set up. It's probably a little out of scope for this webinar today, but that's how we would do that if we wanted to. That's all for alerts. It's pretty straightforward. Screen just gives you all of the alerts that are possibly there. Of course, we could set up dashboards that would could narrow in or narrow our field of vision for those those alerts if you wanted. The next one is dashboards, and I'm actually going to jump to another tab just because sometimes these take a little while to load. But our dashboards here and I'm just on the Getting Started dashboard page, and we again see a little bit similar to what our Launchpad was, where we get all of our different options we have for dashboards. And if I click on any of these little icons, we're going to see all of the dashboards we could see for that particular topic. So under cost, we get our consumer layer, our provider layer, whether we're looking at chargeback, showback. If we look at capacity, we're getting the same thing. And let's go ahead and look at a couple here. If I click on troubleshooting, we can look at a couple of dashboards here to get a feel for what those look like. So let's look at our VM availability first. We get a list of our data centers on the left here, and I believe I've clicked on I'm on a specific data center I want to show today. But this will then give us our uptime in the last 30 days. We can look and see we have 51 in the last 30 days. Out of our total, looks like there's about 100 or 240 something or 250 something. So 51 of those are between 0 and 90%. Perhaps we have some of those turned off or powered off on purpose. Perhaps an issue might have happened that we're just down to 90%. Maybe we didn't get to it quickly enough and resolve any sort of issues. And most of them are 191 of them are at least 3 nines or above here, between 99.9 and 100. So then I can look through all of our VMs, and this is all the VMs in this selected data center. We can see there's quite a few of them that look like they are powered off, but if we click on any one of these, we can see it powered off. It looks like it's been powered off at least for the last month. So that's again something we can look at in a few minutes, where it's something we might want to look at. It's been powered off for a month. Is that something we want to leave powered off or just delete? We can look at that in our reclamation page, which we'll look at in a moment. And then we get the uptime trend. We'll get our cluster uptime. So our cluster has been up, so it's not like the whole cluster went down. It's just this specific VM. And if we click down any different data centers, we'll get a refresh here, and we can look at the VMs in that data center as well. Going back, let's look at let's go back to getting started here. Go back to our troubleshooting. Let's look at cluster contention here, just so we can get a virtual machine dashboard as well as a cluster dashboard. So our cluster will show us then the average cluster performance. How performant have they been for all of our clusters? And then as we scroll down, we're going to get, we click on any one of our clusters, we're going to get the performance of those, as well as any sort of issues with the VMs within it. So if I click on this app cluster, we can see our performance of that hasn't been great, hovering right around 90, but not always that great. Sometimes we want to set our SLAs a little higher. We can see our percent of VMs with CPU ready challenges, our worst VM with CPU ready, any sort of memory contention, DRS unhappy VMs, whether or not we've kind of set up DRS on that particular VM, our disk latency, co-stop, so on and so forth. We get all of our metrics, and we can move around various clusters, whatever cluster we wanted to look at. We could see again, kind of high level on the cluster. Is there any VMs we need to look at? Any VMs we need to check on within that specific cluster? There's many more dashboards as we looked at, many more to go through. There's way too many that we don't have time for today to look at all of these various dashboards that we have. Just wanted to show a couple for example's sake. So let's go back to our Launchpad here. We looked at alerts, we looked at dashboards. Again, sort of outside of the scope, but is the troubleshooting workbench and reporting. We probably won't look at those today, but we can also, let's jump into our log analysis here. And this is something that has changed recently. We've made this a little bit better. If we have the connection with RE Operations for logs set up, we can then look at all of our logs directly here in RE Operations. We can set our time frame, whether we want that 5 minutes, 24 hours, 7 days, custom time frame, and then we can jump directly into operation for logs if we wanted. But we can set our filters here, and we can set that by host name, severity. We can set it by an app name if we have a specific application we wanted to look at, or just the priority. You can say priority, contains whatever we'd like it to be. Probably priority isn't right for if I wanted to use error, but whatever we wanted that, we can set our filter and really get the filter down and filter into our logs. Let's go back to our Launchpad here. We are still in, that was kind of the end of observability that I want to talk about today. We do have diagnostics, meaning we can look at if we have it set up with VMware Skylines. We can look at Skyline and find out if there's any sort of findings for our environment there. We can look at application monitoring, so we can look at checking services on specific VMs. With agentless monitoring, we can use agent-based monitoring or synthetic monitoring, as well as a list or a host of performance monitoring tools or APM tools that we have from AppDynamics, Datadog, and Relic, Dynatrace. And like I mentioned, we could always use other ways to get to these as well. We don't have to use the dashboard here to look into any sort of application monitoring. If we go to configure, we see down below we have applications and services, and that would take us there. And we could look at all of those pieces directly from here as well. This Launchpad just gives us it's in the name, right? A place to launch from, a way to get to those. If we're unfamiliar with the UI, we can always use this Launchpad. So let's go back to the Launchpad homepage. So now we're back at the homepage here. We've kind of covered most of observability, at least from the beginner standpoint. Let's go jump into capacity and see what we can find there. So the first thing we can assess, we can optimize, or we can plan for the future. We probably won't get into these planning, but that if we wanted to move things around, workload migrations, or just any sort of migration to between a vCenter or on premises to maybe VMware Cloud or AWS or public clouds, we can look at those that we'd look under this planning section. And again, we can see there's a planning section on the far left as well. So let's go ahead and look at, first of all, just assessing our capacity. Of course, we're trying to determine here if the capacity we have set up is going to be sufficient for not only our current needs, but also our future needs. So we get a list then, again, much like we did when we were looking at all of our data centers or all of our clouds, in this case data centers, but all of our clouds in that multi-cloud overview. And we can, it's listed from the far left side is going to be the most constrained data center, or all data centers. And then if we scroll to the right, it's going to get from the red, meaning we're in some sort of challenge with those, to 326 days remaining or greater than a year on our CMBU North here. So it's going to be set up that the data center we need to look at first is always going to be in the left, and the one we probably need to not worry about will always be further to the right. That we don't need to worry about those. But for this one, we're going to look at a specific one here. We're looking at our SC2, DCO2, which is the same we were looking at previously. But it's going to give us our time remaining here. So we already looked at it briefly in that multi-cloud overview, but we see we have 4 clusters at the critical level and 9 that are at a normal level. It's going to give us our recommendations. Basically, is there anything we can reclaim, any resources we can save, or any cost savings we have there? We can look at whether or not this is optimized. And if I go find that data center we're on at the moment, we can see if there's any sort of optimization we can do. We can see it is not optimized at the moment. So we could look at optimizing that, maybe move some workloads around so that, between various clusters in the data center to see if we can make that a little better. We can get our workloads a little more balanced. We can see it is set up. It's eligible for if we wanted to set up our HCI mesh, or if we wanted to set it up where we can kind of share these data stores a little better. We can do that as well. If we look at the further down, it's going to give us all of our clusters on the left-hand side, and we can look at those clusters and see what is happening at the moment. You can see our consolidation cluster. We're perfectly fine. There's not much movement there. If I click on a different cluster, we can see, well, we've in this particular cluster, our production north, we have 0 days remaining until our CPU, based on a demand model, runs out, meaning we've already passed that. We can see our line right here, this gray line, we've already passed that line. We're already using more, are demanding more CPU than what we've allocated. So that's probably our biggest part, what we're most constrained by there. If we look at maybe another one, we can see we have these projections out for what this is going to do. We can see though that we've already passed that threshold again. There we go. This is what I was looking for. So if we look at what we're using here on our CPU, our demand, we can see we're kind of hovering, but we're expected or projected out for the future. And right now we're showing on the left side of this dotted line here. The left side is going to be what our history is, 1 month history. And then on the right is going to be what we're forecasting out. We're forecasting 3 months in advance. So right at almost toward the end of that 3 months, if we look, we're going to start hitting this red. We can see that red dotted line over there. We're projected. We're going to hit that wall pretty quickly over there. Let's go back to as far as capacity. That was just assessing our capacity. If we wanted to optimize it a little better, we can use the optimize section here. So let's go look at rightsizing first. So rightsizing, basically we're going to be looking at, is there any sort of undersized or oversized VMs that we have here? Anything that we can do to make this a little better based on recommendations, and this is based on projections for the future. So we were looking at those projections a little bit on the assessing our capacity, but this rightsizing is really going to look at. It's going to learn what is happening with the VMs in the environment, and then say, well, based on future projections, we think at some point either you don't need as much CPU or memory, and that's not the case here. But in one case, I see one VM that says in the future, based on our projections, there's one VM that is going to need not too much, just one additional vCPU. And if we click our undersized VMs, we can see one of our VMs here that is recommended, again, based on that projection for the future. This cons 100-01 is only allocated one vCPU at the moment, but it's recommended we increase that by one and give it a total of 2 vCPUs. For the most part, that's probably what I do if it's based on the recommendation. I don't like having odd numbers of CPU memory anyway, so just 2 would probably be fine. Looks like we're already allocated 2 gigs of memory, and nothing recommended there. It looks like it's handling everything just fine. So again, this is just to rightsizing to if there's any sort of CPU or memory, either oversized, undersized, we can look at that from there. Let's go back here, go back to capacity, and let's look at our reclamation. Reclamation, obviously, if we're trying to reclaim things, so we're again learning in the background. The longer a VM or anything runs, the more we can learn about it, and the more we can look at seeing what we need to do with it. And in this case, we're talking about reclaiming, so we're looking at potentially saving resources, but also cost saving. So it's going to click what we need, or going to calculate what we need to do in order to save this amount of cost. So right now we can see there are 45 total VMs that have some sort of reclaimable resources we could take back, and 42 orphan disks we could reclaim as well, so we get some of that storage space back as well. So on the right, we're getting our total reclaimable capacity. So how much can we reclaim just in this specific data center? We already know we didn't really look at, or we did look at, there wasn't anything that was oversized. We're not necessarily reclaiming here because of we've oversized anything or sized anything too large. In this case, we're looking at basically anything that has, and if I scroll down, we can see what those are. Any of these clusters that have any sort of powered off VMs we can get. So it looks like that'll save us about $900 a month. We could potentially power off or delete some VMs. We're looking at idle VMs. So things that have been idle, and that's something that can be customized as far as looking at what we consider an idle VM. If it has less than a certain percentage or less than a certain amount of activity within the last 3 days, 7 days, whatever it might be, we can then say, okay, these are pretty idle. Maybe we don't need them. Perhaps we can consolidate workloads into another VM or another cluster somewhere else. Any unused or any older snapshots, and it looks like there aren't any there. I don't see that there's any money we can save there, so I don't think there's anything that is considered an older snapshot we don't need. And then orphan disks, and we can move around these tabs to kind of look through what the list looks like. Would that resize it for us? And then we can look at those VMs just like we looked at in the previous section. In this case, we're looking at idle VMs. We could save $45 a month if we moved this VM somewhere else, or at least move the workloads, and we can see what we can reclaim: 1 vCPU, 2 gigabytes of memory, and 20 gigabytes of reclaimable disk space. It will give us, looks like it's been idle or basically no activity on it for at least the last 41 days. So quite a bit of time there that we potentially save. And we could also then exclude any VMs we wanted. We can schedule an action directly from here if we wanted. We can schedule deletion. We can schedule that power off. If it's just sitting idle, we can delete it completely. We can exclude this from our list for the future. Oh, we're getting a refresh there. We can delete it from our future, or we can export this list, whichever tab we're on. We can export that list as well if we wanted. So that's kind of all I wanted to go through on this capacity section. Again, we talked about potentially planning for future migrations, but we could also go through workload optimization. That's a little more advanced than I wanted to go today. If we wanted to, again, balance our workloads throughout clusters to ensure better performance of those as well. So I'm going to pause at this point to see, Aram, has there been any sort of questions that we wanted to get answered at this time?
No questions as of yet, but I encourage folks to type their questions in the Q&A section, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Team has covered a great deal of information here. So again, if you have any questions, concerns, you're not clear about a certain functionality or how to perform a task, feel free to ask a question.
Yep, absolutely. That's what we're here for. We want to teach. We want to help everybody learn and learn to use the product as much as possible. Again, from going from these kind of basic things we're looking at today to more complex, more advanced. To get everyone to that power user, right? That's really being able to customize a product to exactly what you want it to be able to do. So moving on, the next thing we're going to look at is cost. So we're looking at our cost section of the Launchpad, and we have a few different options here. We're not going to get again into planning. That's probably a little more out of the scope for today. We're going to look at a couple things here that we can do with our costing. Now, everything that we've looked at so far, all we need to do there is connect into a cloud account, be that vCenter or VMware Cloud and AWS, or whatever it is, our cloud account, and we'll start getting data automatically in those. There's one additional step here that we're looking at for costing, and that would be you have to set a currency. And we've already done that in our case. So we don't need to do that, but there would be little pop-ups everywhere if we had not set our currency. That's one additional step that does need to be taken before you get any sort of costing information. And it's really easy to do. You go to administration, and again, there are links that would take you there automatically. Just set currency, and it's done. It's a one-click kind of thing. So let's look at, first of all, our total cost of ownership. And kind of see, again, we get our tabs. We can look through across and look at whatever cloud we want to look at, be that vCenter, be that VMware clouds. In this case, we're not going to get into our public clouds. That's handled, we do have them here, but that information is coming from VMware ARIA cost or Cloud Health or powered by Cloud Health. So that information is coming in as well, so we can look at that as well. So let's look at our vCenter just for simplicity today. We're going to get our total costing, and it's going to give us a couple options. We can look at that by capacity, So our capacity used, we can look at that by set up our cost drivers, we're going to get some automatically going to set our cost drivers for us if we want to make that more accurate. That is, those are editable. We can edit those cost drivers to make this more accurate for a situation, specifically for things like server hardware. Right? Not all of our hardware is going to be the same price, depending on where we might purchase that hardware from. So we can set that and make it a little more accurate. We can set our labor, make that a little more accurate. So these are all editable as well. So of course, costing, we're looking at how can we save money? Where can we save money? What can we do to basically save our budget, or make our budget a little more flexible? And we can look at that again. I didn't mention it, but we can look at by data center and find out our data center as well. That is our most expensive to least expensive as well. Scrolling down, we get then our potential savings. So where can we save the most money? So at the moment, it looks like we have reclaimable hosts. This light green section here is our biggest section. We can save money there. We can look at our idle VMs. And this is where we could turn some of those off again, or delete them entirely. We have quite a few powered off VMs as well, where we could say, do we really need that running? Do we need that capacity there? Can we delete some of those and use those funds somewhere else? And we get a list. If we wanted, we could turn some of these off and to say, okay, I don't want to count oversized VMs in here. I want to leave those as they are. Maybe I wanted to not count orphan disks as well. So now we can then look at our new percentages if we've turned a piece of those off. Same thing by data center. We're going to get our, in this case, not most expensive data center, but this is going to be, since we're looking at potential savings, we're looking at where can I save, or what data center can I save the most money by showing it a little attention. And then realized savings at the bottom. Basically, where have we already taken advantage of these potential savings? What have we done that has already saved us some money? We can see in this case, a largest section here is oversized VMs. So we've right-sized some of those VMs. We looked at the right-sizing page. We've right-sized some of those, and now we're getting our oversized VMs is where we're saving, already have saved the most amount of money. It looks like the same thing as well. This green section, this first section on each of our data centers, looks like that is where we have already saved, potentially saved our money there. Again, we mentioned a little bit, there are plenty of dashboards that go through each of these topics. So there's quite a few dashboards here we can look at, giving us recommendations, or it's giving us recommendations of places we could go to look at some of these things. All right, so that's again, let's look at. I'm going to skip cost drivers. I'm going to mention we can edit those. We can edit rate cards and pricing if we wanted to check into that. If we wanted to look at our optimization, I'm going to skip a little bit of this dashboard. This is giving us some of the same information that we just looked at as far as the total cost of ownership, but this will then give us additional information. It's giving us potential realized savings we already looked at, total cost of ownership, what our actual versus what we could be saving. So this is where that if we took advantage of all of our realized savings, we'd actually be down here at this pink line. So this is where we are, the blue line, pink line is where we could be. But this gives us additional information as far as what is our average cost per VM. It gives us, again, our realized savings, but in this case, we're getting that graphed. It's graphed out for us where our realized savings are coming from. It's going to give us then our breakdown even further of where we could save potential money with idle VMs, powered off, so on and so forth. But then also gives us our cost increases, meaning if we undersized VMs, if we have these undersized VMs, we looked at actually sizing them correctly, or at least according to the recommendations, then we could potentially be also charging or getting charged an additional $433 a month by right-sizing, by adding either CPU, memory, or disk space there. So it's calculating all of that for us. So let's jump back. I'm going to go back to our Launchpad. That's kind of all I wanted to cover in the cost part. Let's look at compliance real quick here. And compliance is let's just go ahead and look at it. We get the same sort of option. We can look at vCenter or VMware Cloud or AWS, but it's then going to give us our options as far as what we want to look at. So this is there's a lot of red on this page, but that's letting us know we're not compliant in a lot of spots. We can look at according to our vSphere security configuration guide, or we can look at down below any of our regulatory benchmarks, so CIS, or we're looking at HIPAA. So if we click on any of these, we're then going to get how well are we relating to these particular benchmarks. We can see a few of our VMs here are not compliant according to HIPAA guidelines. Will give us our percentage of compliant versus non-compliant in any of the benchmarks we're looking at, and then give us our object breakdown. So it looks like most of our VMs are compliant. We have a little over 100 that are still showing as non-compliant according to HIPAA regulations, or if we did it, just according to maybe the vSphere guide or vSphere hardening guide, we can look at that as well and find out all of our objects that aren't compliant according to that. And we can pick and choose as we go along. If we wanted to, we don't need to always be compliant according to, all of these benchmarks. So we just, want to do whichever one applies to our current situation, or potentially just the vSphere security guide we could look at as well. And that's all I wanted to go into for compliance. Of course, we can't add custom compliance if we wanted to add our own. Perhaps we wanted to use one of these benchmarks as a standard and then customize it additionally from there. We could certainly do that as well if we wanted. That's kind of it for compliance. Just goes into maintaining compliant environments and making sure we're complying with those standards. Moving to sustainability, this is going into making sure that we are doing well for the environment, right? We're trying to get as high as possible as a green score. We looked at this originally at the very beginning, and this green score is basically giving us an overall standard we're trying to hit. We're trying to hit 100%. Now, hitting 100% is very difficult. We'd have to be on completely renewable energy. We'd have to probably have at that point our own energy farm set up. It'd be very tough to hit 100, but we're trying to get this as high as possible. And we're using this as sort of a guide